I want to welcome you to the very first episode of the Func Med Nation podcast. Now, it is traditional for new podcasts to take the first episode to do an introduction of sorts. So let me start by saying that this podcast is less about me as your host as it is about the guests that I'm going to have the privilege of talking to over the next year and beyond. Nevertheless, let me just take a moment to introduce myself just in case someone doesn't know who I am. I'm Steve Noseworthy. I'm a chiropractor with my basic training, but I am a functional medicine practitioner. In fact, I've been teaching 1, 2, and 3-day functional medicine seminars on a wide range of topics ever since 2008. I'm also an adjunct professor with the Maryland University of Integrative Health, where I've developed and I teach a master's level course on neurology and nutrition. So again, for those of you who don't know who I am, let me tell you my story just in a couple of short stages, if you will. I am Canadian, born and raised there, but as of January 2023, I now hold dual citizenship with the United States. My first undergraduate degree way back in the 1980s was in business and marketing. I worked for a couple of advertising agencies in Toronto for a few years after graduation until I was inspired to become a chiropractor by a student doctor at the local chiropractic college. If you know Toronto at all, it's called CMCC or Canadian Memorial. So I was inspired to become a chiropractor. I moved to St. Louis where I did my background, my training, and at that point I got 2 more degrees. One was a bachelor's in human biology, and the second one was my chiropractic degree. And I graduated in 1995. I've been working in natural health ever since. And after graduation, I worked in Missouri for about 2 years. Now, fast forward 1997, I was awarded diplomate status by the American Board of Chiropractic Neurology. Throughout these episodes, I'll be talking to different functional medicine docs who also happen to be functional neurologists. And I held that diplomate status until 2014. And in that same year, in 97, I moved from Missouri to Florida, and I joined a growing new multidisciplinary clinic. And I was the lead chiropractor on the team, and I eventually became the clinical director of what ended up being an 8-person multidisciplinary team. I was with that group for about 10 years, and when I left in 2007 to go solo, at that point I think we had 8 different practitioners: chiropractors, medical doctors, nurse practitioners, acupuncturists, oriental medical docs, nutritionists, homeopaths, physical therapists, you name it. And we had 30 plus staff, something like that. But in 2007, when I left to go out on my own, that's when I was introduced to functional medicine. I went to my first blood chemistry seminar, functional blood chemistry analysis, that was sponsored by Apex Energetics. That's when I first got introduced to the Apex Energetics ecosystem of seminars. And I met a man by the name of Dr. Datis Karazian, and I know for sure that many of you will recognize that name. He was my first introduction to functional medicine. And I threw myself into this 110%. And within the year, Dr. Karazian asked me to join his speaking team, which I did in around 2008. And so I've spent the last 15 years balancing my time between my own clients and traveling the United States, teaching thousands of doctors at this point who have come mostly from the United States, but literally from around the world. And I've been fortunate enough in the last 15 years to be one of the most requested speakers in that Apex Energetic seminar system. Now, I stopped doing the manual aspects of chiropractic back in 2009 when I went full-time into functional medicine. And I kid you not, and this story is going to come up in a couple of the episodes in the first month or so that you listen. But my first functional medicine client actually met me at Starbucks because I was still building out my office space. And again, that story is going to come up with some more detail. It's a fun story, and it speaks to the fact that your practice can be pretty much anything that you want it to be. So listen out for that as you go through the episodes. I started taking virtual clients back in 2010. And that was well before the virtual practice was popular. In fact, that was back when all you needed was a website. It didn't even have to be a good one. And people would find you online. Social media wasn't really a thing. at that point either. And those are certainly some of the changes in our industry that have happened that we've all had to try to account for and adapt to. But in 2020, my wife and I, we decided to hit the road. And so we sold our place and we bought a fifth wheel RV. And we've been living and traveling full time in the RV ever since. In fact, in the last 2.5 years, we've covered about 60 to 65,000 miles between the United States and Canada. And because I'm 100% online and I'm not chained to a brick and mortar, we have a degree of freedom that few practitioners will ever know. But this podcast is not about that per se, other than your practice can be pretty much what you want it to be these days. In truth, I never set out to be a functional medicine practitioner. And I certainly never set out to be a fairly well-known seminar speaker. But functional medicine spoke to me in a way that few things in my life ever had. And so much of what I know has come to me from standing on the shoulders of giants. But like you, my knowledge base is part of things that I've learned from others, but also very much a part of what I've discovered myself in practice, working with real people with real problems. And as much as I love to travel and teach, what I love more is to connect with others in our field, in our community, and to share ideas, to share information. Because here's a fundamental truth that I know is going to come up in some of the podcasts, is that you don't know what you don't know. And there's a tendency for all of us to stay isolated within our own little microcosm, our own little practice, to see what we see and not see what we don't see, and to develop approaches and perhaps attitudes about functional medicine and perhaps even health in general that might not be serving us and our clients as best as we can. So that brings me to the purpose of the podcast. It's to bring together a steady stream of experts, not just on the clinical side of things, but all aspects of the Func Med life, right? We're going to talk to experts in all aspects of clinical as well as the business side of things. We're going to pay attention to our own health because we all know how important it is not just to talk the talk, but to walk the walk. So what are you going to learn from the podcast? Well, hopefully something you don't already know. Somewhere along the way, you're going to listen to someone who knows something that's going to be a nugget, and it's going to be worth all the time that you've invested. But if you're like me and you want to be the best clinician that you can be to serve your community without losing yourself in the process, then I feel like you've come to the right place. So let me give you some particulars about the podcast. We've already launched, as I'm recording this, I've already launched the first 4 episodes, kind of a pre-launch. And I've got another 14 episodes pre-recorded that are going to be released over the next several months. And I'm recording this at the beginning of February 2023, just to give you a time marker. New episodes are going to be released every week. Typically, they're going to be on Tuesday about 5 o'clock in the morning. That's Eastern Standard Time. And we're on all of the podcast platforms. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon Music, pretty much any popular podcast platform will be on it. But if you prefer video, then all of the episodes will also be uploaded to our dedicated YouTube channel. And I'll put the link for that in the episode description below, so you can just click that and go straight to the YouTube channel. Now, over time, this podcast is going to grow into a full online community supporting all aspects of the Func Med life. So there are many more good things to come other than just the podcast itself. This is just the beginning. So please do me a favor and subscribe or follow so that you get notified every time a new episode drops. I wouldn't want you to miss anything. And use the link in the description to be added to my mailing list so I can notify you of any changes or improvements that are coming along the way. Listen, there are so many great people in our sphere doing great and wonderful things. Why don't we get together often so that we can share, learn, grow, and be inspired by each other? I'll see you in the first episode.